The damage to a sculpture crafted from moose skull and antler could have been far worse. Artist Shane Wilson donated the piece, valued at $50,000 to the Canada Games Centre. Thieves lifted it from the centre last September. In April of this year, though, it was recovered, although no charges have been laid. Yesterday, Wilson saw it for the first time and the damage done to his sculpture. He was relieved to learn his creation is repairable. The person doing the delicate restoration is Valery Monahan. She's a conservator with the Yukon Government, and she's with us in the studio now. Good morning.
Good morning.
For people who have not seen Shane Wilson's Seasons sculpture, could you describe it for us?
Well, it's a very impressive piece. It's a complete moose rack with the antlers still attached to the moose skull. And he's done really elaborate carving work. The skull has lots of geometric work done on it, and big chunks of the antler have been cut away to reveal beautiful scenes. Very elaborate, very delicate looking, but at the same time massive.
Absolutely, and I have checked it out a couple times when I used to work out at the Canada Games Centre. So what sort of damage has been done to this sculpture?
Well, to be honest, given what happened to it, the damage is quite minimal. There is a section of one antler tine that's snapped off. There's sections of the moose antler that get quite spiky, and one of those is broken at its base where it joins the more kind of palm-like areas of the moose antler. There's a tiny bit of damage to the very front tip of the sculpture, which kind of relates to the what would have been the tip of the upper jaw on the animal. That's been either worn or chewed away. The upper surfaces of the antler are darkened a bit, and it seems to have gotten a little bit wet at some point because there has been some mold growth to the surface. But really, that's the only damage. And given how fragile this object is and what it's been through, it's not bad at all.
Were you surprised then that this was all the damage done to it?
To be honest, when I did go to first see it after it had been returned, I was surprised knowing how fragile these pieces are. And actually, because they're so large, every time you move them, you potentially, you put them at risk. To be honest, I was expecting more damage to the carved out areas than there are.
Right. Now, since we are looking at bone, what can be done for things such as mold and even the yellowing that you were talking about?
Well, to be honest, it's probably never going to go back to the exact original color. Although, to be fair too, over time it would always have changed a little bit. We are going to look at attempting to remove as much of the mold as possible. Certainly, we may try to change the surface color in the very moldy areas to try to bring it back to a more consistent look, simply so that we avoid kind of a slightly spotty appearance. We'd like to make it look a bit more consistent with its original appearance. But, that's something that we'll just have to figure out as I work through the treatment. The main work is going to be to reattach the antler tine section, which will be, I hope, a quite straightforward adhesive repair.
Right, so you don't imagine this to be too difficult then, to attach this portion?
I'm not going to say that because that's a bad thing to do before you start a project.
Yeah.
I think for a conservation treatment, I hope it will be relatively straightforward. Again, I'm really pleased with how little damage there is.
Right. Now, this mold and the yellowing, you attributed it to just moist atmosphere that it must have been kept in? It's hard to say.
Yeah, and to be honest, it could easily have been something, it may have gotten wet, or as you say, there may simply have been enough high relative humidity that a layer of condensation sat on the upper surface. It really does seem to be more one surface than the other, but you can get mold growth on almost anything. Is the minute you get a high humidity and a little bit of condensation sitting on a surface above freezing, even for a day or two. It doesn't take much to let mold grow.
Right. Now I do understand that you've said, you're not quite sure how the process will go, but any sort of timeline that you're looking at? I know it's hard to say.
It is hard to say. And when I was asked to do this, of course, I have all other projects on the go. I'm hoping to get the work done sort of over the summer and early fall. That would be my goal. But I hate to say one specific date because if it turns out to be more complicated at some point through the process, and there will be, consultation with Heather Leduc, who's the Government of Yukon Arts curator, and with Mr. Wilson as well. So I hate to say, we'll have it done at this point when in fact we haven't quite figured out what all I'm going to do.
Have you worked on such a delicate and intricate piece like this before in your career as an art conservator?
I've worked on lots of delicate and intricate pieces. I've never worked on anything quite like this. Shane's carvings are really unique, and I've never seen anything like this done on such a massive scale. I've worked with bone and antler before, and I've worked with different types of art objects, but no, I've never worked on anything quite like this. So it's going to be really fun.
You mentioned that, for example, the coloring, it can never necessarily go back to the way that people remember seeing it displayed. But will there be some visible signs of the wear and tear that it has seen during this situation?
Well, I don't want to say it's never going to go back. I mean, it's not going to be exactly the same color.
Right.
We are going to attempt to minimize the discolorations and make the piece look more kind of cohesive. There will be evidence of wear and tear. What I'm aiming to do is to repair the sections so that the piece appears whole. For instance, there is that wear to the tip of the upper jaw. I'm not going to try to do anything to make that go away. It's part of the life of the piece. It's not making the piece unstable at this point. We'll document it so in future, when we look at it, we'll know, oh, that's not new damage. That relates to the theft and return, of 2007, 2008. Mm-hmm. But we're not going to attempt to change the sculpture now and make it look pristine. It isn't anymore, but it's still going to be, a whole and beautiful piece.
Thank you so much for coming in and letting us know. Best of luck with the process as well.
Well, thank you very much for asking about it.
Valery Monahan is a conservator with the Yukon Government. The sculpture is expected to